skilled hands, a good ear, and a sense of rhythm. These are what it takes to craft some of the world's finest instruments. From vintage guitars worth $500,000 to ceremonial gongs. We went to workshops across the globe, bringing music to life.
With a single tap, Mike Dadson can turn a faulty oboe into one of the world's most expensive instruments.
And then hopefully at the end we should achieve a bottle-tight joint.
When he's done with it, this oboe will cost almost $14,000. That's more than 4 times the price of some professional flutes.
We like to say you're only as good as your last oboe, basically.
How good was your last oboe?
Very good.
But before it reaches Mike's desk, artisans select, age, and then whittle rare African blackwood into an oboe base just millimeters thick. This nearly endangered wood is just one of the factors limiting the production of quality oboes. So what makes an oboe so difficult to make? And is that why they're so expensive? For high-end oboe producers like Howarth of London, it takes 5 years to make an oboe from start to finish. Oboes are one of the most complicated instruments to make. And because they're prone to cracking, high-end oboes have to be made of the best materials, like this African blackwood. Howarth buys only 2 square meters of African blackwood a year, which costs it $25,000. And obtaining African blackwood, locally called mpingo, isn't easy. It's harvested from only the Miombo woodlands of Africa, in countries like Tanzania. And it's a threatened species, and at risk of endangerment. So loggers are only allowed to chop down trees that are over 60 years old. They must submit a request, acquire a permit, and ultimately pay a fee of $151 per cubic meter they export. The scarcity of African blackwood looms large over the industry. African blackwood isn't typically farmed. It grows in the wild, so to combat overharvesting, conservationists in Kilwa, Tanzania, have gone to great lengths to ensure these in-demand trees are managed sustainably.
Ina thamani sana na tunajua inapatikana Afrika huku, kwa hiyo ni utambulisho wetu pia, kwa hiyo ina historia yake, kwa hiyo inabidi tuilinde. Kwa hiyo tunahitaji jukumu la pamoja, tusiseme wakala wa huduma za misitu ndo ana jukumu la kuhifadhi peke yake, hapana.
The most valuable part of a log is the heart, which becomes the basis of the oboe. The oboe is a complex woodwind that supports extensive mechanical keywork. It's subject to moisture generated by human breath, making it prone to cracking when made with weaker woods. But the same properties that allow African blackwood to support the complexity of an oboe are also what make it so difficult to work with. The first step in construction is to shape the wood, which requires metalworking equipment. Artisans start by hollowing out what will become the interior of the instrument. Then, they sculpt the exterior and refine the shape. This process is carried out carefully over a number of years and with remarkable precision.
The fact that we can turn a piece of wood to within 2 or 3 hundredths of a millimetre consistently is just remarkable, really. Most engineering companies are using those tolerances to work with metal.
Between each round of shaping, the wood is stored for at least a year to mature. Aging the wood ensures it stays strong and doesn't crack.
During the day, we're blowing warm, dry air over the stock, and then at night, the compressors are turned off, and so we're going from hot, cold, dry to damp. So we're really treating that wood stock as badly as we can, because we want it to move and change, and if it's going to crack, let's get it out of the system early so we don't waste any time on it.
But the wood isn't the only thing that contributes to the overall price. Once the basic shape of the oboe is complete, artisans begin to create the oboe's complex mechanical keywork. After drilling the initial tone holes, workers solder and file the keys to shape by hand. The keys are dipped in silver for protection and are then fitted to the oboe body.
I just A bit more movement.
This step alone can take up to 60 hours to complete. According to Howarth, the complexity of the keywork determines the price. The more keys in the oboe, the more expensive it will be.
A clarinet has 17 keys typically, whereas an oboe has almost double that as a student model.
And a professional oboe can have as many as 45 keys. Howarth has invested close to £1 million in machinery to ensure each component is of the highest quality. But Howarth says its biggest expense is the craftspeople. The labour required to assemble the oboe accounts for 60 to 80% of Howarth's costs. And it takes years of training to perfect the art of oboe making. Every artisan at Howarth boasts at least 20 years of experience in the craft. Among these artisans is Mike Dadson, one of Howarth's finishers. He is tasked with fine-tuning the last few elements of the oboe. One of his most important tasks is fitting cork pads under the keys. Mike sands down different sized corks until they're paper thin. This step is essential because a single air leak will render the oboe useless.
My engineering needs to be very good on these because I'll be fitting them to the thinness of a very thin cigarette paper. And then hopefully at the end we should achieve a bottle tight joint.
While making an oboe, some of the keys and metal parts will inevitably get slightly bent, and it's Mike's job to fix them. If an oboe has a single imperfection, it can't be sold for top dollar. Fixing bent keys is a test of patience. Sometimes straightening out one key can bend another piece elsewhere.
I found the point where I perceive the bend to be, so hopefully I'll just be able to
One back.
Mike often takes over 3 days to fine-tune an oboe, but all this patient work pays off. The oboe is now ready to be sold, but with a 5-year-long production time and increasingly rare raw materials, the number of oboes Howarth can make and sell is limited. Its workshop produces only 800 oboes a year, and of those, only 200 are professional grade. Limited production results in higher prices and makes quality instruments hard to come by.
I can imagine there are less than 20,000 oboes being sold each year. I know that Yamaha make 20,000 flutes a month, and that's just Yamaha. So the difference in scale is absolutely enormous.
Oboes are also regarded as one of the most difficult instruments to master. With such a steep learning curve, there aren't enough oboe players to justify production on a scale that would keep prices low. But professional oboe players, like Emily Palethorpe, rely on the continued production of this centuries-old instrument.
I think this is my 5th Howarth, and I haven't once had one crack.
For Emily, the time and care Howarth puts into each oboe sings through in the end product, so she doesn't mind the high cost.
There is no question in my mind that they're worth every penny. To play on something that's so beautifully made, that's such excellent quality, means the world to my professional career, and allows me to just then relax and be the artist I want to be.
It takes about 11 months to craft just one Steinway & Sons grand piano, and these instruments don't come cheap. A Model D concert piano in ebony, the most affordable finish of any Steinway piano, will cost you about $187,000. But that's nowhere near how high prices can reach. Steinway has produced 2 of the most expensive pianos in the world, worth over $2 million each. The next most expensive piano is half the price, at $1.2 million. But with several other premium pianos on the market, is there something about Steinway's sound that stands out? And is that what makes these pianos so expensive? Named the Rolls-Royce of pianos by the BBC, Steinway has produced some of the most sought-after grand pianos for over 160 years. It's It's the piano of choice for Billy Joel, Lang Lang, and many other professional musicians. But compared to other high-end piano makers, it's often Steinway's sound that sets it apart.
As a performer, I can wear many different masks depending on the piece that I'm playing. There's some pieces you want to be very, very diabolical, and list, And at the same time, lightness.
Creating that sound starts here in New York, at one of only 2 Steinway factories in the world. Each grand piano is 5 to 9 feet long and weighs between 540 and 990 pounds. Often, the bigger the piano, the pricier it will be. About 85% of a Steinway piano is made of wood, and one of the most crucial woods is used for the soundboard.
The soundboard is the life of the instrument, the soul of the instrument. This is Alaskan Sitka spruce. This is the most expensive wood that we have in the piano, and we actually get it from the trees primarily that are on the shady side, the north-facing side of these islands. So they grow very little each year, and that means that we have growth rings that are very close together, not spaced apart.
Sitka spruce is used in other stringed instruments like guitars, and it grows in a few areas in the northwest US. But more than 50% of the Alaskan Sitka spruce they source won't meet Steinway's standards. The wood must have a very specific grain density and direction, both which can impact the quality of sound. Steinway looks for closely packed, straight grains, no more than plus or minus 15 degrees off a 90-degree vertical grain. There's a reason it's so strict about this. It's partly why, when you press a key on a Steinway piano, you hear a distinctly long, sustained tone. The soundboard's edge must attach perfectly to the piano's rim, the curved wooden frame of the instrument. The full rim is made up of an inner and outer rim. Some piano makers attach each of these pieces separately, but at Steinway, a team of artisans bends both together. Steinway says this method gives the piano a stronger foundation, lowering the chances it will break. Steinway uses hard rock maple for both the inner and outer rims. The key here is to use wood that will, again, allow sound to flow freely.
Some companies, as an example, will have hard rock maple for the outside rim, but the inside rim, to save money, they'll use something like Luan. Luan is not as dense and hard as hard rock maple. And when you have your sound waves in that soundboard, some of them are being absorbed a little bit by that Luan, more than they would be by hard rock maple.
The consistent touch of the keys is another valuable element unique to each Steinway piano. There are just 2 artisans in the entire factory trusted with weighing off all 88 keys of every keyboard. This ensures each key is balanced, so a pianist won't have to use more force to press one key over another.
I used to dream about the pianos chasing me. Now it's not a problem. It's up to they the boss. I listen, I pay attention to what it wants. That's the key to it, is pay attention and watch that hammer. That's the key to it.
Each key is connected to a felt hammer. When pressed, the hammer strikes the strings to create sound. A key shouldn't respond to the finger's touch too quickly or too slowly.
So when I go to check the return, it stays. You see the hesitation? It's no good. That means it'll stay up in the piano. You see how fast that one is? That's too fast. So I take this one away. Then I put this one back, and it wants the small one. You see? So I put the small one. You see how nice it is? And that tells me what it wants. So that shows you the difference. Everyone is different.
One of the most difficult jobs is the final tone inspection. The goal is to create a balanced tone throughout the piano by slightly adjusting the hammers as needed.
From note to note, we can soften or harden these mallets, or hammers as we call them, and balance the sound that they generate into the string.
The quality of a piano's tone is incredibly nuanced, something only an experienced ear can decipher.
Well, if I take this note, and then soften it. In this case, I will put a needle in the hammer to soften it. Then you'll hear that tone change. It's a little bit smaller. And in increments, small steps, I can go through and find the notes that are too big, too bright, and step them down. Well, I'm 58, and I started when I was 28, so that's 30 years and counting. I'm still learning how to do this. It never stops.
Like the ways you can customize a Rolls-Royce car, you can do similarly with a Steinway piano. Depending on special editions, veneers, and wood finishes, prices for a single piece can reach $500,000, like these pianos designed for Steinway by Lenny Kravitz. In the piano vault underneath the factory, Steinway houses one of the most expensive pianos it's ever produced, worth $2.5 million. On average, the price of a new Steinway piano increases about 4% every year. This is partly because the cost of Alaskan Sitka spruce increases at a higher rate than inflation, according to Steinway. And while the new pieces get more expensive, old ones become more valuable too. A Steinway piano can last several decades with the required touch-ups and restorations. A 1965 Steinway Model D piano is worth over $98,000 today. That's more than 13 times what it likely sold for. And although there are several elements that greatly impact the price, it's the musician who ultimately decides what the piano is worth to them.
This dried out pumpkin shell will be sanded, cut, decorated, and transformed into one of the most important instruments in classical Indian music. It's called a tanpura. And for hundreds of years, craftspeople like Farooq Abdul Majid sitar maker have hand-carved them out of gourds instead of wood.
जब ये चार तार जैसे बनेंगे तो पूरा विश्व का भंडार वो तानपुरे के उसमें से निकलता है.
His family has been making musical instruments like tanpuras and sitars for 7 generations in his hometown of Meerut. This city of over 500,000 people in Western India is known as a hub for classical musicians and as the birthplace of this craft.
तानपुरा या सितार बनना म्यूजिक इंस्ट्रूमेंट मीरज में बनना बंद होगा तो मीरज को कोई पहचानने वाला नहीं होगा.
It takes at least 3 weeks to make just one, and they cost almost 3 times as much as the smaller electronic versions. We went to Meerut to find out how the art of turning pumpkin shells into instruments is still standing.
यहाँ पे अभी जो तुम्बा है उसको निकालेंगे.
Imtiaz Abdul Majid sitar maker says the secret to a Meerut tanpura is the shell of a bottle gourd. This variety is grown specially to make instruments and must be hung to dry and harden for a year. He soaks it in water for up to 2 days and scrapes it clean inside and out.
भिगोने के बाद कैसा है ये जो अभी जो हार्ड है इसमें तो एकदम जैसा रबर जैसा रहता है. भिगोने के बाद उस तरह से होता है वो.
Imtiaz started this job when he was just 13 years old. Now, at 44, he works alongside 7 family members, hand-making tanpuras and sitars. He cuts the shell about a quarter of the way in and scrapes out any debris left over. This will become the tumba, the body of the tanpura. Wood will make up other parts of the instrument, like the soundboard and the neck. Ensuring its good quality is crucial. They season it for 3 years to strengthen it. They take their time crafting the wood, sawing, carving, and filing it down.
फिर रहता है और ये पूरा हाथ पे है. मशीन से तो ये काम नहीं बनता कोई.
Shaping the pieces alone can take up to 12 days. But after 31 years, woodwork has become Imtiaz's specialty. He prepares the top of the tumba for the neck joint, known as the gullu. It connects the tumba to the rest of the instrument and must be fitted perfectly to ensure the best sound. He uses bamboo nails that he makes himself. He says they merge well with the tumba and give a more finished look. These sticks of wood preserve the tumba's shape as it dries for 2 to 3 days depending on how sunny it is.
जैसे कि तबली जिस तरह से चाहिए उस तरह से इसको फिटिंग बनाएं.
To make the tabli or the soundboard, Imtiaz traces the shape of the hollow tumba onto a piece of wood and cuts it out. He spends a day carving and shaping the tabli.
लेकिन जो भी है हमारे नज़र पे काम चलता है. नज़र पे जो भी होगा काम परफेक्ट बनना चाहिए ना.
It takes at least a day to make the neck of the tanpura, known as the dand. Imtiaz uses a block plane to hollow out a 40-inch piece of wood. He assembles the tanpura and glues the pieces with wood adhesive and taps to check the sound.
अभी ये आवाज़ है. यहाँ पे ब्रिज आएगा. यहाँ से आवाज़ है. यहाँ से आवाज़ है. इसमें भी आवाज़ परफेक्ट है. यहाँ भी आना चाहिए.
Then Imtiaz hands it over to his uncle Farooq.
अस्सलाम वालेकुम.
वालेकुम अस्सलाम.
क्या इम्तियाज़ क्या चले?
अल्हम्दुलिल्लाह.
He's been designing the family's instruments for over 40 years. And it's a group effort. 8 of his relatives work together to preserve the legacy.
वो उस तरह पहले रफ करेंगे, फिर वो जैसे आँखियों को चुभेगा, अच्छा दिखेगा, तो फिर ठीक है. ऐसे फिर हमारे जो बड़े भाई हैं उनसे बातचीत करके बाबा ऐसे ऐसा ये पैटर्न अपने को यहाँ पर करना है, तो ये अच्छा दिखेगा क्या नहीं दिखेगा, तो बोलेगा अच्छा दिखता है बनाएंगे, तो वो भी सजेशन उनसे ले लेते हैं.
They spend hours carving peacocks, flowers and vines out of wood and strips of white plastic.
देखो अभी इस काम में थोड़ा क्या है, हाथ काम करने की वजह से हाथ एकदम सख्त हो जाते हैं, मुलायम नहीं रहते हैं, क्योंकि छन्नियाँ और हथौड़ा का थोड़ा हेवी होने की वजह से हर अंग यानी जो हाथ का जो एरिया होता है वो सब सख्त हो जाता है.
In the past, they used ivory, but the Indian government banned the use of it in the late 80s. Farooq mixes coal dust with wood glue to make the black coloring. Polishing brings it all together, but it comes at a price.
कुछ लोगों का साइड इफेक्ट है. ये साइड इफेक्ट होने से उनके जो हाथ होते हैं थोड़े गल जाते हैं, यानी जख्मा वगैरह होते हैं.
He adds a natural resin called gum copal as a final layer and scrapes off any excess polish. It can take up to 3 weeks to make one tanpura. And the family's techniques haven't changed in almost 200 years. If anyone asks Farooq what he does, all he has to say is his last name. The name Sitar maker is used by the instrument-making descendants of the man credited for introducing the pumpkin tanpura. Some say the idea to use pumpkins as instruments came to Farid Sahib Sitar maker in 1850, after seeing Hindu monks use the shells to store water. Some say it came from seeing African ships use them to transport jars of honey. While other parts of India made the tanpura with jackwood, Farid found the pumpkin gave it a stronger vibration and better sound. The instrument became a staple for classical singers throughout India in the late 19th century. And its popularity put Miraj on the map as home to the best handcrafted instruments. But when electronic tanpuras hit the market in 1979, demand for the handmade ones dwindled. The family now sells only half of what they used to 25 years ago.
आज के लोकेशन में, आज के पीरियड में हम साल में 100 से 125 तुम सितारे या तानपुरे बना लेते हैं।
Every piece of Farouk's is made with precision.
तो हमारा सिर्फ एक उद्देश्य है, मकसद है कि अच्छे साज बने और इसकी फैला यानी रोशनी हो जाए।
He drills 4 holes to the top of the dand. This is where the pegs will go.
इससे मार्किंग में जब गलती हो जाती है तो इससे तार टूटने का संभव होता है।
The strings are made of Japanese steel that he buys from a market in Mumbai. He threads them through these small beads called manka. They're used to fine-tune the instrument.
जब तानपुरा पूरा तैयार हो जाता है, तब उसको तार और खूंटियाँ बैठती हैं, तब जब ब्रिज रखने का उस पर जो प्रेड आता है, तब हमें मन में शांति करेंगे कि तानपुरा जड़ से अच्छा बोले।
The bridge made of camel bone supports the strings. These cotton threads called javari help enrich the sound. It takes artisans years to master tuning a tanpura. Simple factors like room temperature and humidity can affect the sound. So craftsmen must have a trained ear. Farouk sits for 3 hours, tightening and loosening the strings until they sound flawless.
जब ऐसे लगता है कि चलो अभी ये अपने लिए परफेक्ट हुआ, पूरा परिपक्व हुआ है, अब हमें इसे अपने ग्राहक के हाथ में देना चाहिए, हम मुनासिब समझेंगे।
The sitar maker's reputation for high-quality handmade instruments has helped them stay afloat. It's why singers like Subhadra Desai still use the tanpuras made by them.
आप किसी भी आर्टिस्ट को पूछ लीजिए, गायक को, वो मेरठ से ही तानपुरा मंगवाते हैं। एक परंपरा बनी हुई है कि वो उस तरह से ही बनाएंगे तानपुरे।
She has been practicing Hindustani classical music for over 4 decades. When she was just 13 years old, she got her first tanpura, which was made by Farouk's family.
तानपुरे क्या होते हैं कि ये ना अपने बच्चे जैसे होते हैं। उसके लिए जितना प्यार होता है ना बच्चे के लिए, तानपुरे के लिए गायक को उतना प्यार होता है।
The industry is facing competition from electronic tanpuras and phone apps. But Subhadra says that while digital options may be practical, they do not match the authentic tones of the original.
वो कान में जब तक देखो तानपुरे को, जब हम तार को ऐसे बजा रहे हैं तो ये तार हिल रहा है, तो उसका जो वाइब्रेशन जब तक आ रहा है, वो वाइब्रेशन आपको अपने गले से जो आप स्वर निकाल रहे हैं उसके साथ मर्ज करने में वो मददगार होता है। वो यहाँ पे सीधे आ रहा है, इसको इधर तो नहीं रख सकते।
She performs throughout India and teaches music at universities. Many of her students still use tanpuras made in Meerut. A fully decorated tanpura can cost up to 33,000 rupees or around $400.
डेकोरेशन सिर्फ जो हमारे जो ग्राहक हैं, कस्टमर हैं, उनको जो है सिंपल डेकोरेटेड का डिज़ाइन ज़्यादा लगता है, क्योंकि ये मामला जो है पैसों का मामला है।
They make about 6 to 8 tanpuras a month and split the profits among themselves.
और एक काम में मेहनत ज़्यादा होने के वजह से मुनाफा कम है।
They worry that apathy and modern alternatives may render the family business obsolete. But their deep love for music has helped them carry on the family's legacy.
हमारे भगवान से अब ऐसी प्रार्थना है कि ये कारोबार फूले और फले, ताकि संगीत का विश्व में भंडार हो।
Carving this bracing is the most crucial step in building a CF Martin & Company acoustic guitar. But you won't even see it on the finished product. This X-shaped pattern of wood under the hood is what gives Martin guitars their signature sound. It'll cost you at least $2,800 for Martin's most iconic American-made model, the D28. But that's nothing compared to the priciest guitar Martin sells, a limited edition Dreadnought that goes for $125,000. And on the secondary market, the instruments sell for even more. Some of the oldest in Martin's collection are estimated to be worth nearly $500,000.
This is our pre-war D45. This guitar sold for around $240 when it was new, and now it's worth six figures, well into six figures.
And while its reputation among celebrities contributes to the brand's popularity, musicians say there's a one-of-a-kind sound a Martin acoustic guitar makes. So what exactly makes these guitars sound different? And is that why they're so expensive?
My goal is to make $1 million Martin. Haven't done it yet.
Chris Martin IV is the sixth generation of his family to run the company. His namesake, Christian Frederick Martin, founded the company in 1833.
I work at a company that makes the best of its kind. I work at a company that makes the real thing. We're not making a commodity. We're not making a copy of a Martin guitar. We're still making the original Martin guitar.
Martin employs about 1,100 people across its two factories in Nazareth, Pennsylvania and Navajo, Mexico. The craftspeople in Nazareth work on the high-end models and custom designs. It all starts with selecting the right wood. Guitars and other instruments use what are called tone woods. These have special properties that vibrate and transmit the ideal sound for musical instruments. Typically, spruce is used for the tops and bottoms, rosewood for the sides, and maple or mahogany for the neck. But Martin uses a wide variety of woods for its instruments. These tone woods are responsible for the clear, bell-like tone that musicians like Craig Thatcher say is a key difference in Martin's acoustic guitars.
Every guitar has their own voice, particularly acoustic guitars. And there is a Martin tone, a Martin voice that you can distinguish when they're hearing it on the radio, hearing on records, hearing it being played on movie soundtracks. The Martin guitar really stands out, that tone. It's a full and rich, vibrant sound with deep and full basses, a really great mid-range, nice high end that cuts through.
The tops and bottoms are not one piece, but actually a panel that has been carefully sliced in half and opened like a book, then glued together at the edges. This book matching helps create a perfectly symmetrical pattern. These pieces are then checked for quality in a process known as candling.
Candling is a light that shines through the wood, and back in the old days they used to use a regular candle and do it like that, but now they upgraded it, thank God.
Dee has been with Martin for 21 years, and she has spent the last 9 working in the candling department looking for any imperfections before they progress any further down the assembly line.
What we do is we grade the wood, it goes from 2 to 8, and then what we do is we candle to look for any sap pockets or pitch pockets or knots or anything like that.
Like Dee, many of the workers in Martin's factory have been with the company for a long time. Rodney Tashner, who currently runs the laser cutter, has been working the line for 33 years.
We are running a 400-watt laser machine here, cut out all the tops, sides, backs, most of all, pretty much all flat stock that's run on here.
The next step is the most crucial to Martin's signature sound, the bracing. Bracing refers to a hidden pattern of wood glued under the top of the guitar for structural support. All acoustic guitars require bracing, but designing effective bracing is complicated. Because the guitar's top is the most important factor of its sound, it's crucial to not burden it with too much wood.
One of the things when you're looking at an acoustic guitar, you want it to be structurally sound, but you also want it to sound good. Because if we brace this too heavy, the top's not going to vibrate freely, and if we don't brace the top strong enough, it could just implode on itself.
In the 1840s, Christian Frederick Martin invented this X pattern, which provides plenty of structural integrity without sacrificing tone. The design was so successful that almost all steel string acoustic guitars made today use the pattern.
And what's that old saying? If imitation is the sincerest form of flattery, we are very flattered because we are very imitated.
A craftsperson will glue the pieces onto the surface with fish glue and use this machine to hold everything in place while it dries. These thin pieces of wood are positioned and then carved into the right shape based on each guitar model.
After I take the guitar, I'll shape down all the braces to a certain size and sand them down and round them out. Every model has its own particular needs. They're all very different, and we do have to memorize quite a bit of them. There's about 50 different patterns that I have to memorize. I started back in September, and it took me about 5 months before I could really start doing these myself. There is a lot of training that goes into it.
The sides of the guitar are separate pieces of rosewood, which are steam pressed into this curved shape and glued together to form the rim. A perforated ribbon of Spanish cedar is attached around the edges for additional support using clothespins. The ribbon adds surface area that will assist with attaching the top and bottom.
As much as we do on the outside, we try to clean up all the glue inside and make sure all of the ribbons where it should be, and braces are fit nice and snug in their pockets.
Aluminium casting is used to attach the top and bottom to the rim and hold everything together while it dries. Next, either this machine or a craftsperson cuts a channel around the edge of the guitar, a process called freezing, to make space for the binding strip. The body is sanded and sprayed with fillers, sealers, toners, and stains to protect the wood. And it's left to hang dry in a curing room at a high temperature until the finishing has hardened. Though many steps of the process are still done by hand, Martin has started to incorporate robotics into its assembly line, some of which were built and designed in-house in its machining department. This giant robotic arm, for example, suctions onto the wood and is programmed to buff each body at very specific pressures. The necks of the guitars go through their own parallel production process. First, they're cut separately into identical base pieces. Then, they're sanded down into shape by hand. Each model requires a different neck shape, so craftspeople use these metal gauges to keep all the shapes consistent. Then the fingerboard, frets and nut are added at stations down the line. But before a guitar can be glued together, a technician will perform a pre-fit to ensure everything aligns perfectly. Steve Miller has worked for Martin for 26 years, and for him, it's a family tradition.
Yeah, we have a lot of family. I could sit here and go, my uncle, my aunts, my sister works here. I had a grandfather that worked here. Yeah, we go back, way back, since 1833, so.
Once assembled, the guitar goes into this machine called a pleg, which simulates the tension of the strings and makes computerized adjustments to the frets to ensure the guitar is perfectly intonated and playable. But the final and most crucial step is to string up the guitar and play it. Only a human being, like Matt Hotchkiss, is suitable for this task.
This is my first job in the factory, yes. I was lucky. I've been a musician for about 8-9 years now. I went to school for music, came out, and then I started working here, and just inspecting guitars has been a dream, so it's been great. My grandfather had an old 76 D35 that I've been playing since I was very young, and it was important to me to work here when I graduated college, just so it lived on through my family and through me.
Matthew will make sure everything looks perfect before stringing the guitar, tuning it, and gluing on the pick guard.
It does take a steady hand to make sure you get it right, but we do use a little bit of a marking to make sure. We also look for any type of defects within the guitar, like any dents or anything that has happened throughout the process.
And last but not least, he will test it out. And place it in the case for the customer. Martin's guitars have evolved significantly over the 200 years of the company's existence. Just take a look and listen to this model from 1834, the oldest guitar in its collection.
You can see it's very different from what we build now. There's a heavy violin influence. It has maple back and sides, that figure-8 body shape.
The company invented the iconic extra-large dreadnought-style guitar, named after a World War I battleship. Martin saw a surge in demand for its guitars during the COVID-19 pandemic, with many people stuck at home looking for something to do. It's seen about 20 to 30% growth per year over the last 2 years.
So COVID created a guitar boom. It wasn't a boom that was good for everyone in the music industry. It was good for you if you made something that you could play at home or home recording. It was not good if you made giant stadium PA systems.
But the popularity of acoustic guitars also means more trees being cut down. So Martin says it's made a big push towards sustainability.
They're called rare exotic timbers for a reason, because they're becoming more rare and more exotic. So we not only have to be more judicious in how we use these traditional woods, we absolutely, positively have to look for alternatives.
While Martin guitars may be expensive, price isn't the only consideration for dedicated guitarists.
When you put the money into a guitar, you expect it to really respond. It's almost like it's a part of you. It's an extension of the artist. And why would you not want to have the best that you possibly can afford?
And though high-end guitars tend to age like wines, increasing in value and quality over time, Chris says players shouldn't buy Martins as just a monetary investment.
Having a Martin guitar that you can play is more fun than looking at your 401k account. And if at the end of the day your old Martin guitar was worth more than your 401k account, bonus.
The oldest bell foundry in the world has been using ancient techniques since the Middle Ages. It takes at least 3 months to make a bell by hand, and each one is unique. The workshop has survived nearly 1,000 years of wars and hardship, but it's a crisis of faith that's putting pressure on the business today. We went to Agnone in southern Italy to learn how this traditional bell foundry is still standing. The Marinelli family has been running the factory for 26 generations. Armando Marinelli sketches bell designs by hand the same way his ancestors did it.
Qui si fanno campane come si facevano 1000 anni fa.
Very large bells are cast in a pit like this, but it rarely happens nowadays. That's because the foundry only operates when there's demand. But the process of making smaller bells is pretty much the same.
Allora bisogna immaginare in questo momento 3 bicchieri, uno attaccato all'altro, rovesciati.
The bottom and the top cup create the shape of the bell. The middle layer looks exactly how the final bell will look, but it's made of clay, so it will eventually be destroyed to make way for the bronze. They start off by building the bottom cup, using bricks and clay.
Dobbiamo creare l'anima della campana, che è il profilo interno della campana.
It's a painstaking job to make sure the pile is level. Then, a worker slathers it with clay to create the middle cup, or what they call the false bell. A wooden ruler called the strickle sets the exact shape, height, and weight of the final piece. This is the part that will be destroyed later. But before we get there, they have to bake the clay from the inside out until it's solid. While the false bell dries, sculptors prepare the decorations. They can use pre-made plaster molds or cast new ones. They place the pieces of wax on the false bell. Next, they apply more clay to form the top cup, called the mantle. It provides the outside shape of the bell with the wax designs embossed into it. Once this dries, they lift the mantle to expose the false bell. Then it's finally time to destroy it to make way for the bronze. This is what a small-scale fusion looks like. Larger bells need a lot more bronze. Once the metal hardens, they lift the mantle and reveal the final bell. For smaller bells, they break down the mantle by hand. The family's attention to detail is clear when they forge the handle in iron. Finally, workers like Antonio Deli Quadri polish the finished bells until they shine.
Siamo una famiglia di collaboratori dai Marinelli da 150 anni.
He's been working here for 6 decades, and at 84 years old, he's technically retired, but he takes pride in tuning the bells. He also leads tours around the workshop. On average, a 100-kilogram bell costs around 3,000 euros, and since it takes months to craft a single bell, they only make a few a year.
Quando viene una richiesta dall'estero, dall'America, e ci chiedono una campana nel giro di 15 giorni, un mese, purtroppo noi dobbiamo dire non è possibile. Noi con il tempo non potremo mai essere competitivi.
The Marinellis still face competition from other foundries who have modernized. Many rely on heavy machinery and reusable molds. Armando says he could modernize like this too, but only as a last resort.
Creare un pezzo meccanico sarà veramente, non dico un fallimento proprio sotto un punto di vista diverso, quello della soddisfazione che può dare una campana di questo.
When the family business started, bells had a very important role in mass communication.
Allora, immaginate le campane senza la corrente elettrica, senza gli orologi. È una funzione fondamentale. La campana era la sirena, l'allarme, c'era un incendio.
Today, Marinelli bells ring from iconic places, like the Leaning Tower of Pisa and the Vatican. And it's this historical connection to the Catholic Church that has kept the foundry running for so long. The church has accounted for about 90% of the foundry's business in recent decades. In 1924, Pope Pius XI granted the Marinellis an official recognition.
Questo qui è lo stemma vaticano che ci è stato dato dal Papa, e lo stemma pontificio, questo qui, Andrea Marinelli, Agnone, Molise.
And they've cast many celebratory bells over the years, like the one for Pope John Paul II's Millennium Jubilee.
Ci emozioniamo sempre perché è un'emozione che va oltre ogni pensiero di piacere. Non si può dire quello che uno prova con la sensazione di questo santo che è venuto a casa tua.
But the foundry has also seen desperate times throughout its long history. Nazi troops occupied it in World War II.
Penso sempre ai miei nonni che hanno vissuto la guerra, un periodo bruttissimo perché si era fermato tutto, rompono le campane e allora diventano i cannoni.
And then a fire in the 1950s destroyed the original foundry and many of its historical records. Now, in the 21st century, Armando is looking for ways to keep the business afloat.
La passione che ci fa fare tutto in vista della nostra fonderia. Adesso che la Chiesa sta soffrendo un po' della fede, dei fedeli che seguono la Chiesa.
Christianity's popularity is declining in many countries across the world, especially places like the US and Western Europe that have historical Christian majorities. With fewer churches being built, demand for bells is low. Also, quality bronze bells like the Marinellis can last centuries. So the family is diversifying. They've created a museum inside the foundry to attract more tourists. They also take some lucrative sculpting jobs. Armando's son, Ettore, is one of the foundry's sculptors.
Io sono la 27ª generazione e tutte queste generazioni mi pesano molto sulle spalle. Essendo giovane, la mia mente spazia anche altre cose più innovative. Ovviamente adesso ci sono i computer, le stampanti 3D, io non è che non ci ho pensato a queste cose, ci penso tutti i giorni. È un po' anche una paura di mandare all'aria 1000 anni di storia.
So for now, he's sticking with making all these designs by hand.
Tra me, mio fratello e ho altri 2 fratelli, il figlio di zio Pasqualino, la figlia di zio Pasqualino, sicuramente la 28ª generazione penso sia salva. Poi sono più preoccupato per la 29ª, 30ª.
Overall, the family's focus is on creating art, so the Marinellis have faith that the timeless nature of their work will help them survive.
La campana in sé per sé è quell'oggetto che ci fa compagnia, alcuni suoni per chi li fa momenti lieti e purtroppo momenti tristi. La campana ha sempre dato un senso alla vita dell'uomo.
This is the moment a sheet of brass starts to take the shape of a saxophone. Handcrafted precision has been part of Henri Selmer Paris' production since 1885. But the use of Selmer saxophones by jazz legends like John Coltrane on his album A Love Supreme helped the brand reach icon status. Since then, musicians have chased the Selmer sound, making vintage and new Selmer prices skyrocket. Top-of-the-line pro-level Selmers are twice the price of the company's biggest competitors, and the most expensive ones cost over $30,000. But do Selmer saxophones actually sound any different? Or is it just reputation that makes them so expensive? The main body of a saxophone starts out as a 0.6 to 0.7mm thick sheet of high-quality brass.
On est assez exigeant sur la constance du métal. Le métal qui permet quand même à la fois des qualités acoustiques, mais aussi une capacité à façonner le métal.
Thierry Auriez has been president of Henri Selmer Paris since 2021. He says the company sources all of its raw metals from the same foundries in France and Germany to maintain quality control. 80% of the manufacturing process is done by hand, and because of that, the Selmer operation is massive. The company has about 500 employees making about 10,000 saxophones every year in its workshop, each with over 600 parts. Each brass sheet is cut with a laser cutter, pre-programmed to get the most pieces from each sheet, with as little waste as possible. These cutouts will form the 4 main parts of a saxophone: the neck, the body, the bow, and the bell. Selmer makes 6 types of saxophones. The 4 main pieces have different specifications for each type. After the pieces are cut and given a basic shape, the bodies and necks are bent by hand by a craftsperson called a boilermaker. The bell is also pushed through this ring, made in-house from liquid tin, which gives it a more precise shape. The flare of the bell is then attached to a thin brass ring to reinforce it and hammered into place by hand. The necks are bent into their crook shape with this device. Bows and bells are typically made by pressing the sheet into a mold, creating 2 identical halves, which are then soldered together. The workers pore over every inch of the instrument, down to these mouthpieces or beaks, which are molded from a vulcanized rubber called ebonite.
Ah bah ici c'est beaucoup de temps. Ah oui, si on doit tout contrôler.
Each one must be perfect. Key parts of this production process were invented by Selmer and were adopted by the rest of the industry. giving the company a reputation for quality that goes back over a century. Take the way the tone holes are formed. Oval circles are first cut by machine into the body, and raised areas, known as chimneys, are pulled out using a method invented by Selmer in 1922. A machine grabs a circular piece of metal inside the body and creates the tiny ridge you can see here. And these elevated chimneys help keep the instrument airtight by providing secure seating for the keypads. The ceiling of a saxophone is crucial to its final sound. Selmer also pioneered a more recent innovation, improving the keys on its newest model.
Les clés ont beaucoup bougé avec l'histoire du saxophone, mais même dans des subtilités dans l'ergonomie. On a lancé un saxophone il y a 2 ans qui s'appelle le Suprême, où on a revu absolument toute l'ergonomie des clés. Chaque clé a été redessinée pour s'adapter parfaitement au jeu des musiciens. Donc il y a constamment des améliorations.
The company spent 12 years designing the Supreme, named after Coltrane's album, working with dozens of saxophonists around the world. Selmer spent so much time on the keys because it's the most important factor in how the sax feels to the musician.
Parce que l'instrument va finir par faire quasiment partie de leur corps. Ça doit être quelque chose qui puisse répondre parfaitement à l'image qu'ils se font de leur propre son, de leur propre expérience musicale.
That's why quality control for the keys, particularly during final assembly, is a top priority.
Des fois, on peut avoir des actions du travail des clés qui fait qu'elles vont se dévisser. Et si on ne prête pas attention, elles vont continuer de tourner, puis des fois, elles peuvent partir.
Another way they test for quality is by placing a small light inside the body. This reveals any leaks or gaps that might have formed around the tone holes, which could affect the sound.
Pour moi, vraiment, ce qui était le plus difficile et ce que je redoutais, c'était vraiment un bon bouchage. Parce que si on n'a pas un bon bouchage dès le début, après, derrière, pour régler l'instrument, c'est vraiment très très difficile.
Pour le commun des mortels, vous mettez les 2 saxophones l'un à côté de l'autre, vous ne verrez pas forcément les différences, mais acoustiquement, d'un point de vue utilisation, d'un point de vue ergonomie, il y a des différences.
The Selmer sound has been immortalized by jazz titans. The golden age of saxophones was between the 1920s, when Selmer introduced its first model, and the 1950s, when it launched its most famous one, the Mark VI. It's this saxophone that John Coltrane used to record one of his most famous albums, A Love Supreme. Many modern saxophonists are chasing this vintage sound, which is why they will often pay a premium for a Selmer from this era. Coltrane's soprano Mark VI sold for $70,800 at an auction in 2005. But for some, it's difficult to put a price on a piece of this legacy.
So some of my favorite saxophones, the instrumentalists that made a huge influence in me, I would say definitely names like John Coltrane, Sonny Rollins, Charlie Parker, some names that I hold dear to my heart. So I first heard about Selmer by hearing my heroes. I did some research and it kept appearing over and over. I see, this guy plays Selmer, this one plays Selmer.
Livio Almeida is a Grammy-nominated saxophonist from Brazil. He teaches at Brooklyn College in New York and is a Selmer ambassador. Selmer has a program called Rewind, where it buys and sells refurbished Selmers for those looking for a more vintage sound. A refurbished vintage tenor Mark VI that's silver-plated, for example, sells for about $15,000, while some newer models may only resell for about $4,000. Livio owns one of these vintage Mark VIs. He says there's something special about owning a piece of history.
And this is an ongoing discussion. What is better, vintage or modern, right? And of course, this instrument here, the Mark VI, represents an era that many instrumentalists from the golden era of jazz had played this instrument and sort of have, this type of sound in their music. here. It definitely has a mellower sound. I love the vintage horns because of this character they have. I think a little bit more than the modern ones, they have this thing, each of them has sort of a unique history, who owned this before, maybe several musicians, maybe a great professional musician played this for 30, 40 years, who knows?
Livio says no matter which of his Selmers he's playing, as a professional musician, he can hear the difference.
Really, like all the Selmers I play, they have a sound, an identity that is very clear from Selmer. It has a center chord that I like, so it feels like it has a lot of meat in it. And it has a certain malleability, that I can sort of, play around with it and manipulate as I please. And it's also a broad sound. It has a lot of possibilities with, a good distribution of mid and high and low frequencies in it.
Livio owns 3 Selmers, and his tenor supreme is priced at about $12,000. But these instruments can get much more expensive, especially when you start adding on luxury finishing touches.
Imaginez qu'on lance une nouvelle couleur de vernis, une nouvelle finition de vernis. Il va de soi que c'est un choix esthétique, mais ce choix, on va le valider acoustiquement.
A saxophone goes through multiple stages of polishing, both by machine and by hand, to bring out the luster of the brass.
Ensuite, il y a toutes les opérations bufflage puis de polissage, ce qui fait qu'à la fin, c'est presque magique. C'est-à-dire vous avez le corps d'un saxophone et vous avez le sentiment qu'il a été fait en une seule pièce.
A special finish, while adding to the aesthetic, can affect the instrument's tone and price. For example, a tenor supreme can reach about $30,000 with a gold-plated finish. Selmer has also been engraving its instruments with signature designs since the beginning.
La gravure, historiquement, est plutôt autour de thèmes floraux qui sont développés dans les années 30 et 40, qu'on a tendance à respecter mais à moderniser.
But the final step in making a saxophone, and one of the most important, is to check the sound. And the best way to do this is by playing it.
Et une fois que cet instrument est fini, on va le faire certifier par un musicien professionnel, avec souvent un dialogue avec le finisseur, pour aboutir à un instrument irréprochable.
A playtester like Mattia Tomat will make sure everything feels and sounds perfect by playing each assembled saxophone.
À niveau des bruits, il n'y a pas de bruits bizarres.
Selmer requires its playtesters to be high-level musicians, like its customers. Mattia is currently studying for his masters at the Conservatoire de Versailles. If something sounds off, he will go back and inform the final assembler, who will check for any leaks or flaws in key assembly.
Même dans les mêmes modèles, il y a quelque chose qui se change parce que c'est un instrument artisanal, c'est normal qu'il y a des petites choses qui changent, mais ça c'est la beauté de la variété dans la musique.
Once a saxophone passes the test, it's packed up and shipped to customers around the world. Ultimately, Thierry says Selmer's instruments are only as good as the musicians who play them.
On travaille énormément et tout le temps avec des musiciens, puisqu'encore une fois, nous, entre guillemets, on ne fabrique que des outils. Alors on essaie de faire en sorte que ces outils soient les meilleurs du monde, mais celui qui va utiliser l'outil pour réaliser une œuvre, c'est le musicien. Les musiciens, c'est quand même l'âme de Selmer.
The unmistakable sound of the gong has held spiritual significance in Southeast Asia for centuries. Hand-beaten from sheet materials, the labour-intensive shaping and delicate paintwork result in beautiful percussive instruments. Souvenir gongs can be bought for just a few dollars, but large, finely tuned gongs made from the best materials can fetch tens of thousands of dollars. So what are gongs actually used for, and why are they so expensive? This is Thailand's Gong Highway, a 21-mile stretch of road that is home to more than 50 family-owned gong companies, who collectively produce roughly 7,000 gongs each year. In the heart of the Gong Highway is Bunrak Sisinaha's workshop. As a third-generation gong maker, Bunrak has been studying and practicing gong making for almost 50 years.
ชอบทำคล้องติดตามการทำคล้องพ่อและปู่ย่าตายายมาตั้งแต่เล็กๆตั้งแต่6 ขวบครับจนปัจจุบันนี่แหละครับก็ชอบการทำคล้องเพราะว่ารักในการงานอาชีพงานฝีมือหรือว่างานแฮนด์เมดนะครับเป็นงานที่ยากก็ว่าได้จะว่าง่ายก็ได้สำหรับคนที่เป็นนะครับ
The process begins by cutting the sheet material into a circle. No materials go to waste here. Even the offcuts are used to make the largest shape possible. It's at this early stage where the eventual cost of each gong is determined.
ความถูกความแพงนี่นะว่าเราต้องการใบเล็กใบใหญ่หรือว่าต้องการวัตถุดิบครับถ้าวัตถุดิบเป็นเนื้อเหล็กมันก็จะถูกถ้าต้องการแพงกว่านั้นนิดหน่อยก็เป็นเนื้อสแตนดาร์ดถ้าต้องการที่มีคุณภาพสูงสุดก็มีคุณค่าก็จะเป็นเนื้อทองเหลืองครับ
Once the edges have been smoothed, a welder attaches the sides. This flat dish is then ready to be hammered into shape. The gongs made here in Thailand are of the bossed variety, where a centre knob is surrounded by smaller nipples. This design is stenciled on the back of the gong with a homemade compass, and bangers begin to hammer out the shape. The bangers use templates engraved into tree stumps that allow the knob and nipples to be hammered out fully and evenly. Then comes the hardest part, the tuning. Tuners observe and train for years to master their skill. He strikes the gong in different places and listens for acoustic imperfections. Using a mallet to make slight alterations, he continues this process, hoping to reduce dissonance in the sound frequencies emitted from the gong.
ทักษะเนี่ยเราจะรู้ว่าเสียงคล้องจะทำยังไงให้มันดังครับแล้วจุดไหนที่มันไพเราะจุดไหนที่เสียงกังวานเราต้องรู้ครับต้องรู้ว่าจะตกแต่งตรงไหนดีบางเจ้าเขาชอบเสียงสูงก็ตามเหมือนกับคอร์ดเสียงแต่ได้เสียง
Once satisfied with the sound, the gong is coated in enamel, ready for intricate artworks to be hand-painted. Bunlak's workshop produces gongs of all different shapes and designs, including specially made gongs which can sell for up to 1 million baht, or around $33,000.
คือพิเศษเนี่ยคือเป็นคล้องใหญ่ครับที่ลูกค้าเขาสั่งเป็นพิเศษว่าต้องการเอาไปเป็นอนุสรณ์หรือเป็นแบบว่าเป็นวัดไหนที่มีชื่อเสียงเขาชอบเอาไปให้นักท่องเที่ยวชมว่าคล้องเนี่ยต้องการคล้องใหญ่พิเศษแล้วก็ลายที่สวย
The cultural significance of gongs is clear to see in Ubon Ratchathani, a major city at one end of the Gong Highway, where the world's largest gong towers stand proudly next to the Wat Tam Kua Sawan Temple. The use of gongs is deeply ingrained in Buddhism, and according to the Tourism Authority of Thailand, the Gong Highway is responsible for supplying most of the country's 30,000 Buddhist temples with their gongs. So what about the rest of the world? In the West, gongs have become commonplace, not only in popular culture, but also in meditation studios and symphony orchestras. The largest non-Asian gong manufacturer is Paisti, based in Germany. It's been producing gongs since 1906, and its largest gong, an 80-inch symphonic model, retails for around $27,000. This type of flat-face gong, sometimes referred to as a tam-tam, gives more of a crash sound, which is different from the tuned tones of a bossed gong. Paistie's method for producing gongs are more scientific than those on the Gong Highway, with acoustic testing equipment used to evaluate the gong's frequency. But the quality and traditional craftsmanship at Bun Lak's workshop is clear to see, and the historical importance of the gong is felt throughout Southeast Asia.
ไม่ว่าจะเป็นงานวันเกิดงานแต่งงานกองบวชงานประเพณีต่างๆครับในวัฒนธรรมไทยนี่นะครับไม่ว่าจะเป็นงานกฐินใช่ไหมครับงานผ้าป่าอย่างเงี้ยก็ทำหรือคนเขาอยากทำบุญสะเดาะเคราะห์พวกนี้เขาก็ซื้อไปถวายวัดครับคือเสียงกังวานนะครับกังวานแล้วก็เสียงยาวแล้วก็ตีไปเนี่ยรู้สึกกังวานในหัวใจซึ้งในเสียงว่ามันเสียงเป็นเสียงบอกบุญนะครับเสียงบอกบุญคือเสียงคล้องนี่เป็นเสียงบอกบุญเป็นสัญญาณเพราะว่าจะเป็นคนเฒ่าคนแก่ที่โบราณเขารู้จักว่าเสียงคล้องนี่เขาจะยกมือนี่สาธุโมทนานะครับคือเสียงคล้องอยู่ที่ไหนนี่คือเสียงบุญอยู่ที่นั่นครับ
It takes 20 people to build this 6-foot tall instrument. Across 4 months, artisans pull, screw, and twist together thousands of parts. And buying a pedal harp is no minor decision. Professional models can cost $70,000, over 10 times what some smaller harps without pedal mechanisms cost.
There are finance options, just like you're buying a car.
Prying open a pedal harp reveals the complex mechanisms that enable its versatility. So, what can this massive pedal harp do that other harps can't? And what makes it one of the most expensive instruments on stage? We enlisted the help of Brandy Younger, a Grammy-nominated artist, to explain the complexity of the pedal harp.
Right? The glissando. That's what harps are probably most known for. But we're the only ones that can do that. So that makes us special.
When you watch a harpist, you probably notice their hands, but you might not notice their feet. Harpists change the pitch by stepping on these pedals, allowing them to play freely in any key. On lever harps, mechanically simpler cousins of pedal harps, musicians must reach up to set the key by hand.
You do really need to be really quick with your hand so that you can continue to play and then change the pitch in the middle of a song. There's a lot of repertoire that you can only play on pedal harp and cannot play on lever harp.
But this convenience comes at a steep cost. The fact that each harp is handmade is a big part of why they're so expensive. Beginner models start at about $14,000, but prices can exceed $70,000. And the expenses don't stop once you buy the harp.
Harp maintenance is a thing. And when you have 3 harps like me, it's a thing you cry about. You have to buy a cover. We're talking $750, maybe $900 for the full cover. And then a dolly. A lot of us have what they call the Rolls Royce of harp dollies, and that's $1,000 American dollars. $500 for strings, $300 to $400 for a regulation without anything wrong, right? Because just like a car, it's quite an expensive profession.
One of Brandy's harps was custom made by Camac, a company that's been building harps in France for over 50 years. And many of its artisans have worked here their whole career. Inside, pedal harps are deceptively complex. Artisans install about 2,000 parts by hand, making adjustments 1 millimeter at a time. These metal arms are part of the mechanism. Artisans build everything before tucking it all into the neck of the harp. Each tiny component needs to move consistently without missing a beat.
When I move a pedal, these little parts will turn and shorten the strings by this distance, which corresponds to a semitone.
Artisans attach the pedals to internal rods connected to the neck. When a harpist moves a pedal, the mechanism inside twists these forks, changing the length of all the strings of that note and the pitch.
So we have 7 pedals for each note of the scale. This is C natural. I move it down to make it sharp, and then I move it all the way up to make it flat.
When a harpist plucks a string, it vibrates off the massive soundboard. Much of the wood on a pedal harp is ornamental, but the soundboard has specific requirements.
The main wood we use are not the most expensive part of the harps. It's only the spruce, because this is the wood which will produce the tone of the harp. So it comes from a very specific place in the Alps. The grain of the soundboard must be absolutely parallel and perpendicular to the direction of the strings. This is really the heart of the sound.
Because of minor differences in the wood, no two harps, even from the same company, sound exactly the same.
The sound of the harp is in fact connected to the quality of the wood of the soundboard. But the volume of the harp is made by the sound box, which is this volume at the back of the soundboard which will amplify the vibration.
We play with the harp leaned on our shoulders so we can feel the vibration. I can really take a moment and just listen to the music and also physically feel the vibration through my body.
Now artisans get to work cutting, sculpting, and sanding each piece. Camac makes about 300 pedal harps each year. And while the tools are modern, Jacques says harp making is largely the same as it was 200 years ago. One of the most striking pieces is the column. Artisans fill every inch with ornate carving. But it'll take a week to finish this design.
C'est indiqué ici. Je commence toujours par faire un dessin. Ensuite, avec mes outils, là, qui sont des gouges, je fais du frappage. Ce qu'on appelle du frappage, c'est-à-dire en frappant.
Jean-Bernard has been carving since he was 14. Most designs he recreates from memory.
Tous les bois ont des défauts et tous les bois ont des qualités. Certains sont plus durs, certains sont plus tendres, et je les aime tous. Je les aime tous.
At the other end of the workshop, artisans coil each of the 47 strings up to the neck. The middle strings are made from animal gut, while the outer ones use nylon and steel. Gut strings produce a warm sound, but are less durable than nylon. Durability is important because a full set costs $500 to $800. Typically, harps need a new set of strings once a year. But making the individual parts is only half the battle. Now, it's time to put it all together. After 23 years at Camac, Guillaume is an expert at visualizing a finished harp from the separate pieces. And workers actually put it together twice. First to fit all of the parts together, then again after workers varnished the wood.
Donc on apprend vraiment ici voilà, tout le montage, l'ajustage, ça se passe vraiment, on apprend sur le tas. Chaque harpe a vraiment son ajustage particulier, quoi. Si je reprenais cette pièce-là, elle irait pas forcément sur une autre canopée.
Most of the artisans in our company has spent their whole life here. It's really in the hands of our workers. Every time one worker leaves, we lose some knowledge.
Pedal harps are much more expensive than their simpler cousins, lever harps, which cost $2,000 to $9,000. Kamak makes about 2,000 lever harps a year. This type of harp is what new players usually learn on.
This I got from my very first teacher. When a student is ready to move from a lever harp to a pedal harp, and I have to have a conversation with their parents, because it doesn't mean just buying something that costs a car. It often means that they have to also buy a new car that can fit the harp inside of it. They both come with their sets of challenges, and there are some incredible lever harpists out there, but I have an easier time on the pedal harp.
For musicians, it's important to have a harp that represents them aesthetically as well as musically.
So this is one of my babies. I have three main babies. This is a Kamak, and the model is, it's a big blue, but it is custom. I call it champagne. Champagne and ebony. There's a pickup on every string. And so I use this harp, especially when I'm performing with my trio or larger groups.
For acoustic performances, Brandy uses her Lion and Healy harp.
Growing up, I always wanted to play music that I heard on the radio. Today, we see it most often in orchestras. But I always did sort of go off the beaten path and had sort of a double life, maybe a triple life. Part of the life was in orchestra, part of it was recording on hip-hop recording sessions, and then part of it was playing at jazz clubs. I think the harp shines in all genres because I really do think that there's sonically room for it in way more styles of music than people are used to hearing. It's not only possible to play the instrument and to take ownership of the instrument, but to take it outside of where it's completely respected and completely expected, and to do something with it confidently and seriously.
Noble & Cooley makes its signature snare drums from a single piece of wood. It's been doing it this way since 1854, making it the oldest drum factory in the United States. The quality of the wood is what determines the drum's unique sound. The company has survived 2 fires, economic crises, and growing competition from mass manufacturers. But adapting century-old techniques and machines is what helped keep the business afloat. We went to Massachusetts to see how 7 generations of one family have kept this factory still standing. Father and son Jay and Nick Jones work on all stages of production alongside a handful of employees.
There's about 37, 38 steps to build a snare drum from start to finish.
You can mess up at every single step, and I have.
It all starts with good wood. Jay debarks logs by hand. Then he trims it into strips that are 5/8 of an inch thick. He gets a few passes in, then turns the log over for more cuts.
By rotating the log again and again and again, we're trying to get the prettiest, straightest grain that's going to bend.
This is walnut, one of the 9 wood species Noble and Cooley uses in its shells. Next, Jay brings the planks to the planer, which shaves and smooths it to the right thickness. At this point, they start to sort for quality by eye.
Yeah, I mean, that's going to be tough to make a drum out of.
Only the best planks will become drum shells.
We're not even going to play with it. Over the years, we know what's going to bend well, what's not going to bend well, and what's worth taking a chance on because of the beautiful grain. We're going to start by taking down the pressure.
Jay steams the wood for exactly 3 hours. In this cast iron steam oven, that's about 150 years old. He takes out a plank, feeds it into the bending machine, presses the pedal, and what was once a long rectangle is now a perfect circle. He stuffs it into a wooden form, rolls it over to Nick, who hammers in a center support. Jay and Nick have to be precise with their timing to bend each shell into a form before it cools off. Steam bending is what sets a Noble and Cooley snare drum apart from many drums on the market. Mass-manufactured ones are often made with multiple layers of wood and glue instead of a single plank.
You can see the pace that we normally do it at.
The shells sit in forms for about 3.5 weeks before it's time to glue the edges and support hoops. This is one of Lou Scalzo's tasks. The shell stays like this for 24 hours, but when it's out, it starts to resemble a drum. Lou uses a lathe to smooth out the surface. He goes over the shell twice, once manually, and the second on auto. This is also when Nick and Jay have to make a big decision on the drum's future.
If something is absolutely stunningly gorgeous, we're gonna set that aside to oil it, to have it be as minimal finish and natural as possible. If there's, the grain is a little bland or whatever, then we're gonna set that aside for something that's gonna get painted.
Nick lightly sands the shell, then applies boiled linseed oil with a rag. Depending on the wood, Nick will do this 4 to 7 more times before the final wax layer. But the shell must rest for a few hours between each coat of oil.
I love the contrast in that grain, that varied color pattern, and try to center it in the drums to the best of our ability.
If the wood doesn't pass Nick and Jay's standards, it goes to Lou for painting. For this drum, he's adding a sparkle coat. He brings the drum over to these rollers to dry it evenly without drips. But no matter if it's been oiled or painted, every drum needs hardware.
The fabrication of all the brass pieces is all done in-house.
Like these parts of the throw-off that Jay designed himself.
And our drum designer said he needed a throw-off mechanism that was quiet and solid, and this is what I came up with.
Nick takes each drum shell and drills out the holes. This is one of the hardest parts because if you drill even one hole in the wrong spot, the entire drum is ruined. He's even given himself a No Drill Fridays rule.
Every drum I've catastrophically ruined has been from drilling something wrong on a Friday afternoon. So I just don't do it anymore.
Then he checks that the top and bottom edges are perfectly level.
So as you can see, there's light coming through underneath here, which means that the shell is not sitting perfectly flat. So we need to square and level that edge and then cut it to a point before we can finish it and put it together.
Again, it's just that attention to detail to make sure it is perfect before the heads go on.
To put it all together, Nick lays out all the hardware and screws each piece in by hand. One of his final touches here is to stamp the Noble and Cooley logo on the inside and write in the serial number. He logs this in a notebook along with all the details like the size and finish. The company has kept a record of all the drums it's made this way.
We have all those notebooks kept in a safe that we're able to pull out and reference to see, when they were built and where they went.
Finally, the drums are ready to play, and you'd think that Jay and Nick would be expert drummers.
My brother is the drummer. We grew up playing bands together, and you don't need two drummers.
My famous line is, I play the radio, and I'm pretty good at it.
So General Manager Luke Garrow, who is a drummer, will often give him a play test.
This is our 14-inch Piccolo Maple. It's one of our most popular models of the Solid Shell Classic. Drummers like Phil Collins or Matt Chamberlain have used this on recordings.
Since most Noble & Cooley drums are made to order, pieces can vary from about $700 for a single drum to several thousand for a whole kit or highly customized pieces.
We decided right at the forefront that the world did not need another mediocre product. And if we're going to do this, we're going to do it top shelf. We're going to go after the best quality of sound and find the best way to achieve that.
But they didn't start out making drums for musicians. Back in 1853, Silas Noble made toy drums as Christmas gifts in his kitchen. Then in January, he and James P. Cooley, Jay and Nick's ancestor, decided it would make a good business. That first year, they made about 600. During the Civil War, they made their first real drums for the Union Army, which used them to communicate orders across battlefields. At least one of these drums survives today in their museum after a soldier picked it up at Gettysburg. Production ramped up quickly, and by 1873, Noble & Cooley was producing 80,000 drums a year, most of them toys. In fact, musical toys were Noble & Cooley's staple business throughout most of their history. The factory suffered 2 fires, but the business has been on the same plot of land since 1889. Jay started the music division in the 1980s. Around the same time, most American toy manufacturing started shifting overseas. Throughout its history, Noble & Cooley has been affected by major economic events, but not always in an expected way.
The Great Depression was not a bad time for this company. A toy drum is number one, inexpensive, and number two, it was large. It looked like a lot under the Christmas tree. So come Christmas time, we were very busy.
The pandemic also gave it a boost.
People are at home, they're looking to expand their kits that they already have or pick up a new snare drum, replace something. Our backorder log is bigger than it's been in my 15 years here.
Good afternoon, Noble & Cooley.
Even with this recent uptick in business, Nick and Jay still aren't looking to go up against the big guys in the drum industry if it means sacrificing quality.
Every drum that I'm putting in a box at the end of the day, I know the customer who it's going to, or at least the shop it's shipping to. I like that. Having that ability to know who you're building a drum for makes you care that much more about the drum you're making, and I don't want to lose that.
Being able to come to work with my son every day is just absolutely fabulous. I couldn't think of a better partner, and I hope he feels the same.
Yep, for sure. For sure. I'm just gonna do my best to take it over and run with it.
This is the oldest cymbal business in the world. The Avedis Zildjian Company has crafted cymbals for the Sultan of the Ottoman Empire, American troops during World War II, and the Beatles.
When you think of the sound of a cymbal, there's a very good chance what you're hearing in your head is a Zildjian cymbal.
For 400 years, the company has been instrumental in the evolution of music, developing the cymbals used in modern drum sets. Today, it's the world's leading cymbal maker.
We're really responsible for the entire modern cymbal industry.
I've been playing these cymbals my whole musical life.
The key to its sound? An alloy-making process the Zildjian family has kept secret for centuries. Craigie Zildjian is continuing her family's legacy as the 14th generation president of the business.
The word Zildjian means son of a cymbal maker.
So how did Zildjian become one of the most influential instrument brands in the world? We traveled to Massachusetts to see how, after 4 centuries, this business is still standing. Behind these doors, craftsmen forge Zildjian's secret alloy from copper, tin, and silver. But not even the man who shapes the cymbals knows the recipe.
I have no idea how they do it. I just know it's the best metal in the world for cymbal making. So
1,000 metal castings are made every day. And Alan Levitt sorts and weighs each of them. Even at this early stage, he can hear any issues with the metal.
Wow, but listen for the ringtone. Yeah, you can hear it yourself when I hear it. They possess quite the ringtone.
The ones that pass inspection go into the oven to be reheated. This loader can feed up to 240 castings every hour.
We used to have those long rakes that you put the pies into the oven. That's really a strain on their back.
After 30 minutes, the metal is about 900 degrees Fahrenheit and soft enough to be rolled. Once they've cooled, the castings go back into the oven for 30 to 40 minutes. This process of heating and rolling is repeated multiple times until the castings are as thin as a credit card. And it hasn't changed much since at least the 19th century. Next, the cymbals head to the cupping machine, which will shape the bell. The bigger the bell, the more the instrument will project, and the longer it will ring. Joe Pillai has worked in almost every step of production in his 29 years here.
I love working with my hands and I love music. It's kind of like my way of giving back, you know.
He uses a blanking press to cut the cymbals to the correct size.
All of the extra metal goes into our scrap printer and it all gets recycled.
Then, it's time for hammering. The first step that really begins to change the sound.
It more or less controls the shape and it regulates the sound waves going through.
The impact hammer creates dents at precise points and can apply different pressure throughout. The rotary hammer creates a circular pattern with consistent pressure. Both machines affect the pitch and tone. The cymbal gets its signature umbrella shape in the forming press. The deeper the curve, the higher the pitch. Then it's time for Joe's favourite moment: lathing.
Lathing's where the magic really happens, I think. Different type of lathing, different type of sound.
The shaper scrapes off layers of metal as the cymbal spins. It also cuts small tonal grooves in a circular pattern. Deeper and sharper grooves create more sustain, affecting how long the cymbal will ring out. Joe tapers the cymbal down, making the weight even. He has to be careful not to apply too much pressure, or he risks overworking the cymbal and making it too thin.
You're always troubleshooting. I think you're just trying to figure out how to make the cymbal perfect, you know. That's what I love about it.
Finally, he removes any imperfections with a grinder. Then, this machine smooths out the edges. But they aren't ready just yet. Each cymbal needs to be tested. Joe works closely with Guy Licata, the manager of innovation, to test 200 in half an hour.
At this stage, we're just looking really for major visual and sound defects. You know instantly if it's a good cymbal or a bad cymbal. It's when they're questionable that you really dig into it and debate it. Well, this one was overworked. You can see the rippling.
Yeah. With an acceptable ranges between here and here. So this is the standard. Those are almost identical. So this is considered conforming. This would pass.
Each cymbal is then cleaned by hand. And finally, coated with a polyurethane solution.
Mostly to protect against fingerprinting.
Zildjian has sold as many as 1 million cymbals worldwide in a year. They can cost between $90 and $4,000 each. But even with its global success, Zildjian still operates as a family-owned business.
You can go inside.
This room holds some of the earliest Zildjian cymbals made in America.
We call this the family vault. Some of these fingerprints belong to my grandfather or my father and some of the cymbal testers.
Craigie is the 14th generation Zildjian to run the company. She was the first woman to become CEO in 1999. Today, she works as president.
I never thought I would end up in the family business. It was really just for the male members. These are heavy.
A select few cymbals were gifted to some of the world's most famous drummers.
So we gave one of these to Ringo, and we had to do something so it could adapt to his hardware. But this is very old looking.
The family's story begins way back in 1618 in the Ottoman Empire, in what is now Istanbul. The company's founder, Avedis I, was an Armenian smith who worked for the Sultan, making cymbals for the military band. While trying to make gold, he discovered a bronze alloy that made the instrument stronger but thinner, with a clearer sound. He founded the company in 1623, and it thrived for centuries. The 12th generation owner, Avedis III, moved to America in the early 1900s. He was Craigie's grandfather.
If he had stayed in Turkey, that was not a good place to be for an Armenian.
The factory officially relocated to Quincy, Massachusetts, just a month before the Great Depression hit in 1929. But as the economic crisis took hold, so did a new style of American music.
It was the beginning of the jazz era, which was here.
Zildjian created cymbals for jazz legends like Gene Krupa, Chick Webb, and Joe Jones. Avedis III worked directly with them to develop new cymbals like the ride, the hi-hat, and the crash. Those gave drummers more range and freedom, and were crucial for the evolution of music.
It became the basis for cymbals as we know them today.
This collaborative tradition continued with Craigie's father in the following decades.
The ideas really just kind of flourished as my dad was there, testing cymbals in front of them, all the top drummers of the day, and we'd gain their input. Louis, Elvin, and Roy. Here's my dad. This was my dad's drum kit. I've left this as it was when he was here, when this was his office.
In the 1940s, the company provided cymbals for American and British troops during World War II. But it was the Beatles' first US performance that made Zildjian a household name. In February 1964, Ringo Starr used the company's cymbals during the band's appearance on The Ed Sullivan Show.
The Beatles, bring 'em on!
The Beatles changed everything. All of a sudden, we were back ordered because everyone wanted to start a band, a garage band.
From there, musicians from all genres were lining up to get one too.
Everything from the band and orchestra world, to marching, to jazz, to rock, to metal, to country, to everything in between.
By the mid-1980s, the company was the world's leading maker of cymbals with 40% of the market share. Today, it's made cymbals for drummers like Questlove, Travis Barker, and Anderson .Paak.
This is my dad here. Yeah. My father always said we need to follow the music. So wherever the music leads us, that's how we track it, is through these musicians.
To this day, the company works closely with musicians to develop custom models tailored to their styles.
Artists are looking to express themselves. They're looking for, sometimes it's a sound, again, sometimes it's a tactile feel or response, sometimes it's an emotion.
It's why drummers like Omar Hakim only use cymbals made by Zildjian.
If I have identified a need for some instruments that I don't have in my arsenal at that moment, 11 times out of 10, they've got the solution. This is one of my favorite cymbals. It's called the K-Custom Hybrid Trash Smash.
He got his first set of Zildjians when he was just 8 and has exclusively used the company's cymbals for nearly 5 decades. Over the years, Omar has worked with artists like David Bowie, Madonna, Michael Jackson, and Miles Davis.
It's important to have a set of cymbals that resonates with the music that you're trying to create, speaks to you as a musician. When you blend the metal and the skins and the wood, and you create this tonal palette to kind of cover a full spectrum of sound.
Omar says, although other cymbal companies have popped up, Zildjian still sets the standard.
Even the old ones are the bar. And that's heavy when the entire industry is using your product as the example of what needs to be in the marketplace.
The next generation of Zildjians is already working to continue the family legacy.
Gen 15, they're all board members. Each generation is charged with revitalizing the business and adding something to it.
Craigie says that as long as music lives on, so will Zildjian.
There will always be music. I mean, music is part of our soul, right?
Crafting an artisanal bagpipe takes steady hands, attention to detail, and sharp tools. The bagpipe's history spans around 3 millennia, with roots in early civilizations, and it's been a key part of Scottish heritage for well over 600 years. But there's only one workshop left in the country's capital that still makes these instruments by hand. We went to Edinburgh to see how the city's last traditional bagpipe makers are still standing. At Kilbury Bagpipes, Dave Wardle and his apprentice Rory Black take about 4 days to craft a single instrument. They make many different kinds of traditional pipes, but the most famous of all is the Scottish Great Highland Bagpipe. This style consists of 5 pipes connected to a bag. The blowpipe is the smallest. The player blows air into it to inflate the bag, which flows over the reeds inside the pipes to make music. The 3 pipes on top are called drones. the two tenors play just one note. And the larger bass is the same note, an octave lower. These give the bagpipe its distinctive continuous tone. And then the chanter has holes that the player uses for the melody, like a recorder. Dave always sharpens his tools. He does this around once every hour to keep them in good shape during the intense process.
I've actually got nerve damage in my left arm, which is probably due to the manufacturing of the bagpipes. I mean, you're working constantly with your hands, you're on your feet all day, that wood's very, very hard. You're sharpening chisels, gouges.
He uses African blackwood to make the pipes.
It has a very, very dense grain and gives a better tonal quality. It's also very, very long-lasting, very, very hard wood.
It's popular for high-quality woodwinds like clarinets. Ancient craftsmen used to use local hardwoods to make their instruments, but Dave gets his supply all the way from Mozambique. He drills a hole in a block of wood to form the air tunnel of each pipe. Before the mechanical lathe, artisans had to carve every hole and shape every pipe completely by hand. But now, most bagpipes are mass-manufactured by machines rather than by hand like at Kilbury. As the apprentice, one of Rory's tasks is to roughly shape the wood into a cylinder. As the lathe turns the block, he uses a sharp chisel to round off the edges evenly.
The main motive was the way the pipes are made. Everything's hand done, start to finish. There's no CNC machines. It's all hands-on, being taught how it was done in the most traditional ways that we installed.
Dave takes on the more intricate decoration work, called beading and combing. This is a delicate process that gives each pipe its traditional pattern. The combs are the small bands of grooves cut into the wood, and the beads are the smooth sections between them. Then Dave makes the projecting mounts. He drills these pieces out of wax and puts them on each drone between sections. They help the pipes move when tuning, and hold them in place once the pitch is perfect. Dave applies a coat of varnish to the wood sections and mounts. Then he hammers on the decorative metal ferrules. He buys these from a silversmith for added flair to set Kilbury pipes apart from standard ones. He covers fine wool string with resin to wrap around the fittings.
This resin's very sticky, so what that does, it creates a bond with the wood so it doesn't slip. This is a process called hemping the pipes.
Hemping makes the connection airtight, and it has to be done carefully so the pieces hold together, but can still move just enough to tune. Dave inserts a single reed into the bottom of each drone, and a double reed into the chanter. Like all woodwinds, the reeds vibrate and produce sound when air passes through. Now the pipes are ready to go into the bag. Dave seals them into a Gore-Tex bag with a zipper and rubber gaskets. Traditionally, the airbag was made from animal hides, and Dave still receives some custom orders with this request. But many players say synthetic bags like this have better moisture control and are easier to maintain. Finally, he gives the finished pipe its last decorations, the cover and cords. The protective cover is often made of velvet or tartan, and the cord keeps all the pipes in place.
Okay, and that's a bagpipe fully assembled and ready to be tested before it goes to the customer.
Rory tests the pipes by checking tuning quality and playability. Before he packages them up to be shipped off to Kilbury's customers all over the world.
Now with the internet, it's opened it up worldwide. I mean, you'd be amazed at some of the places we've sold bagpipes to. It's just quite incredible, really. Or why somebody from Kazakhstan would want to play a Great Highland bagpipe, I have no idea.
Scottish Highland soldiers used bagpipes as an instrument of war as far back as the 14th century. Originally known as war pipes, soldiers played them to inspire troops into battle against their English invaders, and to strike fear into the enemy. Their high-pitched tones travel for miles around, making them perfect for the battlefield. They were even used as recently as World War II. Nowadays, bagpipes are mainly used in ceremonial settings, as well as highly competitive and prestigious piping bands. one of which Dave used to play in.
You're supposed to enjoy the instrument. I took it to a different level. I mean, at one point I was probably practicing 3-4 hours every night, every day of the week. Obviously striving to be the best I could. And at the age of 15, yeah, I was playing in grade 1 bands and competing solo and all that sort of stuff, yeah. But there comes a time you have to pull back a bit from it. It's just a bit too intense at times, you know.
So instead of playing the pipes, Dave focused his passion into making them. Mass manufacturing in the 20th century has decimated the traditional craft, flooding the market with lower quality pipes that can be made on a larger scale for less money. Machine-made pipes can cost as little as $100, whereas a set of Kilbury bagpipes usually costs around $1,500. A few years ago, Dave thought he'd have to close the workshop for good due to lack of demand. But he got a lifeline from an unlikely place. Gordon Nicholson is a traditional kilt maker who just happens to have a shop right next door.
Back in 2018, the for sale sign went out outside Kilbury Bagpipes, and Dave had agreed a redundancy package with the then owner. So I had gone back home and spoke with my wife and said, we're going to lose the last artisan bagpipe maker in Edinburgh. And her reply was, you know what to do then.
He also runs a Kilt Makers Academy focused on carrying that tradition forward as well. Together, both shops take advantage of Edinburgh's bustling tourist trade, offering tours and demonstrations. Another way of keeping these crafts alive? Promoting musical heritage. Rory balances his apprenticeship building bagpipes with his passion for playing them. He's been a piper since childhood, and now he plays with Ireland's premier pipe band. Every Saturday, he flies to Dublin and back just to practice with them.
Yeah, it's a big commitment. You end up getting home quite late at night, so.
This devotion is heartening for Dave, and it gives him hope that the craft he's dedicated his life to will continue.
Rory, again, I think it's very like me when I was younger. He's dedicated to his piping 100%. It is important to keep the traditional way going. The traditional way of bagpipes will always keep going. It's taught in the schools in Scotland now, and it's very important to me, but kids love it.
The last step of creating the perfect piano sounds like total chaos. The basher machine breaks in every key thousands of times to ensure it all works perfectly.
The worst noise in the world!
Adam Cox runs the last piano factory in Britain. Here, artisans take months to thread steel strings and install felt hammers, tuning and testing for quality at each step of the lengthy process. A century ago, the UK had hundreds of factories producing some of the best pianos in the world. But a flood of cheaper, foreign-built instruments forced all of them to close down. That's why Adam opened Cavendish Pianos in 2012 in an attempt to save the craft.
It is the sort of thing that if it gets lost for one generation, that's it really, it's the end of it.
We visited his shop in Northern England to meet the last British piano makers still standing. A Cavendish piano build starts with a soundboard, a flexible sheet of wood that amplifies the sound of the strings.
It's a very thin, very light piece of wood, and it needs to be, because it needs to vibrate lots.
It's the most expensive component. The wood only comes from spruce trees that grow at just the right altitude to produce a rich tone. Adam uses wooden sticks called go bars as temporary supports to set the glued wooden ribs on the soundboard's gentle curve.
The soundboard is not a flat assembly, but it's actually got a crown, and that is the all-important thing for producing the tone of the piano. It's like the cone of a loudspeaker, really. And so that will go down onto these back posts now.
Factories in Asia can quickly machine press the soundboard. But Adam says his customers prefer the methods piano makers have used for over 100 years.
A piano that's made slowly will be a better piano than a piano that's made fast.
Adam and his team align the soundboard to the back post and then attach it to the heavy cast iron frame.
Even Adam's helping, look.
And
the important thing is not to get your finger trapped.
The frame is cast as a single piece. It has to be strong enough to withstand about 20 tons of pressure from all the strings. About 230 strings are used to create the 88 tones on an average piano. Each one is painstakingly threaded through a tuning pin and then hammered into place. It's the sort of work that makes your fingers sore. The strings vary in length and thickness to create different tones. Longer, thicker strings produce lower notes, while shorter and thinner ones reach the higher end of the scale. A technician tunes the newly strung piano and lets it rest several times so that the instrument can adjust to the new tension and hold a consistent sound. Then it's time to enclose it in the wooden case and give the piano its classic look.
If you can imagine that this was put upright like that, this would be where the keys are to be played. This is the leg of the piano, and the caster would be on the bottom here.
Adam works with a cabinet maker down the road to create both standard finishes and custom designs.
If someone comes along and says, I want a blue piano, which is what has just happened, of course, yeah, it's really nice to be able to produce a one-off thing for people that they can't get anywhere else in the world.
It puts more pressure on the Cavendish team, though. A scratched piece can't be easily replaced.
I don't like damaging them anyway, but I will take a little extra care with this one in particular.
The final components are the keyboard and what's called the action. This is the intricate wooden mechanism that pushes the hammers onto the strings when a key is pressed. Each of the 88 keys is placed in order, and a technician must wait, measure, and adjust every single one several times.
The margins are so fine with everything, it's fractions of a millimeter.
Hammerheads are tightly wrapped felt layers that can withstand hitting the steel strings for years without wearing down. The heads are glued to a shank, a wooden rod that allows the hammer to move. But they're not one size fits all. Heavier shanks are paired with lower notes, and the Cavendish team tests this by ear. A proper hand-built action is individualized to each piano frame. And once all the parts are in place, the piano is thoroughly tested with the basher. It takes about 3 months to finish a piano. That's why Cavendish only makes about 50 every year. Pianos were invented by Bartolomeo Cristofori in Italy in the early 1700s. Called forte pianos, they were improvement on the harpsichord because the hammers responded to a hard or soft touch to create dynamic tones. Classical-era composers like Mozart and Beethoven popularized piano music. And during the Industrial Revolution, piano making spread across Europe. Britain touted its burgeoning piano industry at the Great Exhibition in 1851. By then, London alone boasted around 200 manufacturers producing 23,000 pianos a year. Pianos became a must-have item in the country's households, from working-class families to the upper crust, for both decoration and entertainment. But the 20th century brought new diversions into British homes. Radio in the 1920s.
This is the BBC Home Service. Here is the news.
And then television in the 1950s.
The Queen is now able to receive the emblems of majesty.
And in the past 40-some years, consumers have preferred electronic keyboards, which can synthesize a variety of sounds and take up less space. The killer blow for Britain's piano industry came from cheaper foreign imports. Mass-produced instruments made in a fraction of the time and at a fraction of the cost. Today, China, Japan, and Indonesia hold over 60% of the global piano market. A Cavendish piano starts at $7,500, and a full-size grand piano costs $30,000. That's double the price of Adam's competitors. And in the beginning, that price point kept customers away.
Our first year we made 2 pianos, then our second year we made around about 6 pianos, and it's taken us a long time to get to the stage we are at now.
But the still fairly small scale of the business isn't the only hurdle Adams had to overcome. There are also scores of older, used pianos that many people give away for free just to be rid of them, or because they would be even costlier to restore to their former glory than buying new.
Put it this way, the first half of a piano's life is a lot more valuable than the last half of the piano's life. I know it's all a bit sad, isn't it? And I'm getting old, but you know, I can always look back fondly to when I was younger. But they're not like violins, you see. Violins improve with age. So we have the best violins in the world were made hundreds of years ago. That's not true with pianos.
So while the market may be smaller in the future, Adam wants Cavendish to keep making high-quality instruments.
Well, it'd be nice if it carries on going after me. That would be the main thing, really.
He offers apprenticeships to a new generation of British artisans and partners with the only school in the country that offers technical piano making courses. All to stay focused on what led him to start Cavendish in the first place, not letting the craft disappear.
In 2017, a single violin bow sold at auction for $690,000. You can buy a beginner's bow for less than $50, but a top-rate professional bow can often cost thousands of dollars. A bow like this is completely handcrafted by skilled artisans, and just one can take an entire week to make. Even the most subtle differences in the way a bow is made will change how well it plays. So why would someone pay so much for a bow? And what makes it so expensive? Violin bows are far more complex than they appear, and so much of what sets the value of a bow comes down to the artisan who makes it.
L'archet idéal, comme l'archet c'est vraiment le prolongement du bras, l'archet idéal ne doit pas faire de césure entre le bras et ensuite l'arrivée sur l'instrument. Ça doit être vraiment le prolongement, ça doit être quelque chose, si le musicien décide de faire une attaque très rapide, ça doit immédiatement se répercuter quand il joue.
Sandrine Raffan has spent the last 30 years mastering this craft at her family shop. To begin building a bow, she needs raw materials from specific regions of the world. The most essential are Pernambuco wood from Brazil and horsehair from Mongolia that cost $900 a pound. Typically, horses in cold climates have thicker and stronger hair, which won't break as easily while playing.
Ce qui est important, c'est d'avoir du crin naturellement blanc. Pas du crin décoloré, parce que le crin décoloré, c'est comme un cheveu, ça devient plus fragile. Ce qu'il faut savoir, c'est que sur le crin, il y a des petites écailles. Donc à force de frotter et de jouer, les petites écailles s'en vont. Donc le musicien va remettre de la colophane pour redonner du mordant. Mais au bout d'un moment, on se retrouve sur un crin qui est lisse et complètement encrassé de colophane.
Because of this wear and tear, even professional ones must be re-haired every 3 months, which is a large part of a bowmaker's restoration work. So much of this process relies on the natural instinct of a bowmaker.
Il y a des personnes qui vont compter les crins, nous on marche au feeling, on va vraiment faire ça au feeling en fonction de la largeur du passant. La nervosité de la baguette, c'est un archet assez nerveux où on peut se permettre de mettre un petit peu plus de crin justement pour que ça réponde bien. Si l'archet est souple, on va justement en enlever un petit peu.
By nervous, Sandrine refers to bows that are too stiff for a musician to maintain balance. They must be sturdy, yet flexible enough to move fluidly.
C'est vrai que c'est un bois qui est assez dense, nerveux, mais en même temps en gardant des grandes qualités élastiques, parce que l'archet doit être, tout en étant nerveux, doit avoir quand même une certaine souplesse. Donc on ne peut pas faire un archet en ébène, par exemple, ça n'irait pas, ce serait beaucoup trop nerveux, ce serait injouable.
Every small alteration by the bowmaker, from carving the head of the stick to tweaking the curve of the bow, determines how well a bow will play and ultimately sets the final value.
Je dirais comme n'importe quel métier manuel de précision, on travaille au dixième de millimètre, donc faut être juste essayer d'être constant dans son travail, d'être précis.
So even as ideal as this wood is for bows, it's up to the bowmaker to determine that the shape of the stick is just right. Then Sandrine must consider the age of the wood, another time-consuming element of the process.
Souvent les archets d'entrée de gamme vont être des archets faits machine avec du bois pas sec. Et donc ces archets, au bout de 6 mois à 1 an, vont commencer à tourner dans tous les sens. Par l'essence du bois, par le vieillissement du bois, c'est comme un vin. Un vieux vin a eu le temps de mûrir, en fait, tout simplement. Même si on utilise du bois vieux, on ne peut pas comparer un archet moderne avec même du bois de 20-30 ans avec un archet qui a plus d'un siècle, voire plus. Donc voilà.
Sandrine has restored bows made by master artisans from hundreds of years ago. These bows only remain playable with routine repairs, But because of their rarity and centuries-old wood, just one of them can be worth tens, even hundreds of thousands of dollars. Whether a bow is ancient or modern, each one appeals to different people, and it's up to the musician to decide whether the price and quality of sound are worth it.
On parle souvent de mariage à trois, c'est-à-dire qu'on parle de mariage avec l'archet, avec le musicien, et ensuite avec l'instrument. C'est-à-dire que pour le même musicien, le même instrument, vous pouvez donner 3, 4, 5 archets différents, le son sera complètement différent.
Like Sandrine, many esteemed artisans have studied this craft in France, where prominent French bowmakers like François-Xavier Tourt developed the modern bow. Bowmakers don't typically go to school as you would with violin making. Instead, many must train as an apprentice for 3 years under a master bowmaker. That tradition continues for Sandrine today, as she shows the next generation how to make bows by hand.
En soi, chaque archet est différent et nous apprend et voilà, et on apprend tous les jours. Et je dois dire, au bout de 30 ans, il n'y a pas un matin où je me lève, je peux me lever des fois fatiguée, mais en tout cas, jamais je me lève en me disant, mince, il faut que j'aille travailler.
The buttons on this accordion are made from mother of pearl, the inner lining of certain seashells. For a full-sized accordion with more than 100 buttons, Pagini spends about €600 on this part alone. That's 4 times the cost of acrylic buttons on standard accordions. This attention to materials is why Pagini accordions can sell for nearly €40,000. But do Pagini accordions sound any different? And why else are they so expensive? The Italian town of Castelfidardo is known as the accordion capital of the world, and here, Pagini makes some of the world's most expensive accordions. Like the one played by Ludovica Borsati, who swears by Pagini accordions for their sound.
Really, mechanically, they are perfect and they are really complex.
While all accordions have 3 basic components, keys are buttons on the right and left sides, and bellows in the middle, most Pagini accordions have a lot of individual parts, over 12,000. Each one is necessary for creating a richer sound, according to the Italian brand. And they're made with high quality and expensive materials.
Per costruire una fisarmonica occorrono innumerevoli materiali, dal legno all'alluminio, al cartone, alla madreperla. È una cosa incredibile di quanti materiali occorrono. Infatti qua occorre anche lavoro di sartoria, ad esempio, che costruisce i manali, qua sono tutti cuciti, questo è un cuoio, poi sotto c'è il cuscino per la mano, per non disturbare la mano mentre suoni.
Take those expensive buttons, for example. According to Adriano, a master craftsman at Pagini for over 50 years, the company uses mother of pearl because it doesn't get sticky or slippery, and it stays cool, even after hours of playing. While the buttons improve the playing experience, the wood used on a Pagini is what impacts the sound.
Diciamo che il segreto è nello stesso legno trovare il legno che sia il più sonoro possibile.
To achieve this, Pagini uses a secret combination of wood. And though the company won't reveal the exact blend, it includes mahogany, maple and cedar. But these don't come cheap. Pagini says a square metre of cedar alone costs almost €5,000. And it's not just about the right blend of woods, but how the wood is cut. If it's not as straight as possible and the grains are interrupted, the sound it produces isn't as rich. When it comes to the 12,000 different parts, Pagini is meticulous, even down to the glue that holds it all together. The company prefers not to use generic vinyl glues because they're water-based and rubbery, which would dampen the accordion's sound.
Delle colle che praticamente sono fatte a base di osso. Queste quando si seccano cristallizzano e diventa come un vetro, e quindi dove ci sono le giunture dei legni è come se continuasse la circolazione del suono.
Higher quality materials come at a higher cost, but this isn't the only reason Piaggini accordions are expensive. Adriano says it's the cost of labour that ups the price. From the mother of pearl buttons to the reeds and levers, the thousands of pieces in each accordion are carefully installed by hand. Each slat is made by hand, shaved by hand, and nailed by hand. The wood and leather skin are glued by hand.
Per fare questa occorre quasi come assemblare un'auto in alta costruzione, molto altamente meccanizzata.
The metal parts on the left side alone take over 60 hours to install correctly. That's at least a week of work for a single element. That's why completing an accordion like the Piaggini Nova takes over a year, and only 20 are made each year. But according to Piaggini, tuning is one of the hardest parts. Tuning a smaller accordion can take only a few hours, but larger, more complex models take up to 30 hours for the reeds alone. It starts with this robot arm Piaggini bought and reprogrammed to test the tongues on these metal reeds. The accordion produces sound when air passes through the thin tongues of the reeds. And there are over 500 reeds in a free bass accordion. That's over 1,000 notes that have to be tuned to perfection. The reeds are then installed, and the notes are retuned by hand by one of 4 expert tuners like Lorenzo. He lifts each tongue to make sure air can move around it freely when it's played. He also adjusts both sides of each reed to ensure they're on key. And once the accordion is fully assembled, retuning can take up to a month. That's intensive compared to the couple of hours it takes to retune a piano. Another reason these accordions cost so much is because of the brand's historic reputation as an innovator.
La Piaggini è rinomata proprio perché noi abbiamo più della metà della produzione proprio data dalle fisarmoniche a bassi sciolti.
Meaning most of its accordions are built to play both bass notes and melodies at the same time. The more common Stradella bass system plays bass notes, with only a few chord options for melodies. The free bass accordion, on the other hand, can play various melodies in the right and left hands, along with bass notes. Piaggini achieved this by developing a more complex model for a converter in 1961. Its converter expanded the accordion's sound capabilities, but didn't make the instrument any heavier.
Qui possiamo vedere la differenza proprio del suono. Io schiaccio lo stesso bottone e ho un accordo. Se passo in bassi sciolti, schiaccio lo stesso bottone, ho una scala cromatica come se fosse una tastiera.
It's also the most expensive part of Piaggini's free bass accordions. The converter, along with the cost of installing it, accounts for almost a third of an accordion's price. Other companies have tried replicating its mechanics because in the accordion world, the lighter an instrument, the better it is for musicians. And the more notes an accordion can play, the more valuable it is.
E proprio con I bassi sciolti è venuto proprio l'era della musica classica, con la fisarmonica a bassi sciolti suonano Bach come se tu sentissi un organo da chiesa. Però ti dimostra quanto questo strumento abbia enormi capacità di espressione.
That goes a long way for advanced accordionists like Ludovica, who believe the accordionist is only as good as the instrument they play.
I chose Piaggini also for another reason, maybe the most important one, and because of the sound these instruments have. It's really a unique and pure sound. It's always so elegant, and really I feel it is the real sound of the accordion, the classical accordion, which is the instrument I fall in love and I want to play.